Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a very special guest. I'm joined by Dan, who is an employee at CG. Dan, thank you so much for coming on. I know the community really appreciates the opportunity to hear straight from the mouth of someone who works on this game.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on. It is always good to be the horse from which the words are spoken from.
So first off, why don't you tell everyone what you do at CG?
Sure. I am the lead game designer for live operations, so I oversee pretty much all of the content that goes out the door. Characters, events, you name it, it's probably undergone. All the balancing, tuning, all that stuff goes out under my watch. So.
And what's your favorite part of the game?
I love PvP. So I am terrible at it. I just don't. I never have ever been good at PvP in anything except for like old school Team Fortress Classic back in the day. But I absolutely love PvP. I love watching people compete, and I love trying to put stuff out that people can engage with and beat each other up. I think it's fantastic.
Very cool. All right, let's dive straight into Rey. So
sure.
What was the overall goal behind Rey's design? What was intended with this character?
So when we think about hero's journey and what that means, the primary thing that we wanted to establish was that when a player engages with our game and they kind of come through the event structure, we wanted there to kind of be this stair step where it's like, you know what level marquee characters are going to be at, right? Some of them can be a grab bag, but they're useful, they're good, they're kind of the core backbone of the game. We wanted legendaries to be a significant step up from that, a real head and shoulders above, that you pursue these legendaries because they are meta definers or shifters or modifiers. And then Hero's Journey is kind of taking that and trying to push that as far as we can without fundamentally breaking the game. And so the starting point there is to go like, all right, Luke is easily the single most iconic character in the Star Wars universe, which means that people have just a natural expectation of who he is and what he should be. Rey is this character that Lucas is bringing into the forefront, and she's kind of taking the torch from Luke, and she's the next generation of what Star Wars is. So while she is starting to build her, for lack of a better word, credibility, that icon status inside the universe, Luke still holds that first place. And so how do you bring Rey in? How do you have her be a heroic character? How do you have her compete with Luke, but not be the same? Number one, not be the same, because then I would just end up with a bunch of parties that are basically like Rey and Commander Luke, and then nobody wins at the meta at all ever. But that she has her own definition and that she can provide some shifts to the meta.
So was she mostly designed with Arena in mind?
No, not at all. Actually, we design all of our characters with Arena in mind because it is so important, and that's a direct player versus player kind of situation where people get really sensitive about characters, so we have to be mindful of it. But she was actually designed kind of across the board, so I think you'll find that she does really, really well in territory wars, and that she's really good inside raids, and that she's extraordinarily useful inside territory battles.
So since Zeta Finn's leadership was already so powerful, and now we have her having a leadership of her own, how was that approached?
It's interesting you brought that up, because that was one of the key elements for us in her design. I wanted people to sit and go, all right, I have a Zeta Finn and I have a Rey Jedi training. Which one do I put in the leadership role? I wanted people to really struggle with that, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I wanted them to put Rey in there. I wanted her to kind of shift Finn out of that lead role for a bit and have her kind of take over the Resistance, because just her in general and how she's being shaped in the movies, like, she is the hero, and having her kind of as the leader in this sense was really important for us. So it was a lot of back and forth to get her to a point where we felt like she could legitimately take over the leadership role of that team and be better than Finn.
So a lot of her kit is designed around resistance use. Now, Luke works really well with rebels, but he's also just extremely versatile. Is she mostly intended to stay mainly resistance, or was it intended for her to be a little bit versatile? Obviously not as extreme as Luke, like you said, but was she intended to be a little bit versatile, like someone like Thrawn?
Absolutely. So, and this was another challenge, right? How much versatility do you give Rey? And then, again, not wind up in the position where 20 of the top meta teams are basically Rey and CLS, and then you're like, well, that didn't work out. So we did try to focus on resistance, but ultimately we did give her some versatility, and I think as people start to experiment with some parties, I think they'll find a pretty couple interesting sweet spots there.
Do you think that she's going to be able to knock Commander Luke out of the meta? Not entirely, but bring an actual challenge?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What was your favorite part of designing her?
So I can't get too deep into some of this because there's a lot of approvals that went back and forth, and I don't really want to give people the what ifs or what could have happened. But there were a couple of situations where we had envisioned Rey a little bit differently, and it didn't quite work out for us in that regards. Just either mechanical builds or putting it in front of people or testing it. Some things kind of maybe were way too powerful. With a character like Rey, it's really easy to just make them so overpowered because you're experimenting with new mechanics, you're experimenting with new ideas. When you have characters like Rey, you really get to kind of take the reins off and just say, like, what can we do inside the game to push this forward or introduce a new mechanic or do something really cool, because she's iconic enough that people will like pursue that and get really excited about that. So there were a couple of points in there where we had some pretty dope mechanics on her. We had to dial those way back because it was breaking the game.
How does she perform under the AI?
So she is probably one of our best performing AI characters. In fact, I think players will find that we have worked hard to try to make her probably the single best defensive unit in the game.
How do you approach that?
So there's a lot of things that we do. So when the game first started, we really didn't have a lot of fine-tuning over the AI, and it wasn't until probably pretty recently that we started to get more tools into the hands of the designers that would allow them a little bit more AI control. Now, it's not perfect, and just as like a small side note here, it's always kind of one of those things where people want the AI to be smarter, and we definitely do as well. It's a larger undertaking than even we initially anticipated when we dug into it, and some of the changes that we've made turned it into a no player could win ever under this defensive AI. So we've had to kind of be careful with that. But we do have some things now on the character side that we can define that allow the character and the game to behave a little bit smarter. Also, we've worked hard to make sure the kit was kind of, I'm not going to say foolproof because I'm going to say that word and then somebody's going to post on Reddit, look at what this moron said, foolproof, and then they're going to post a picture of Rey just getting slaughtered or something, and then I'll be an idiot. But we worked very hard to make sure that she was, like I said, one of our best, if not the best defensive unit that we have in the game. So
obviously she's heavily based around resistance, which makes sense, but I think a lot of people were wondering if there was going to be a Jedi tag, and it's very clear her name is Jedi Training and she doesn't have the tag. So
right.
Was the lack of a Jedi tag, was that more tied to the movie and that would kind of maybe give some spoilers if she had it or if she didn't, or was that strictly because of the game that she would have some unintended synergies with Jedi?
It had nothing to do with synergies, and it had nothing to do that we thought it would break anything or anything like that. It is strictly where Rey is at this current point in her journey. We try to stick as close to what the character is inside their journey and tag them appropriately. And where Rey is, she's not a Jedi right now. Speaking
of her journey, how was relating her to the scavenger Rey incorporated in her design?
So that's always actually kind of interesting because it's the same thing with Luke, right? Like trying to progress him along. With Luke, it's like, cool, we've had those movies for 40 years. We can see how he's moved along. With Rey, people haven't seen her yet, and so, trying to look at her kit, her movements, her animations, that sort of stuff, like trying to keep some visibility that, yes, this is the same person. Luke was like, oh, I have this giant rifle, and then I moved from a giant rifle to a lightsaber. So You can have a completely different set of behaviors, animations, that sort of stuff, because he's literally different. Whereas Rey is like, I fight with a stick, I then move to a stick with a laser attached to it, and so you kind of, are looking at that and saying like, okay, how does she move? What are her behaviors? How does she look? How does she behave? So, and even in her ability kit design, making sure that the names and the kind of the sentiment around them kind of stay in there, right? Like I wouldn't just throw like an AoE ability on Rey because she's never demonstrated the ability to do some sort of area of effect damage or heal or whatever. So it's just trying to find out who she is at the start and kind of keep that. So I think she's translated pretty well. I think her moveset and animations are consistent with the first iteration of her.
The other character that we've gotten for episode 8 is the unmasked Kylo.
Yeah.
What was the relationship between those two characters' designs? I know she's a hero's journey character, so that's a little bit different, but was there similarities in how you approach them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like with all characters that have multiple iterations, Han Solo being one of those, like, you're always looking at their growth, right? Because I think the biggest challenge is, all right, I've got 5 Han Solos. Like, how do I make each one different? Or 10 Han Solos, right? Like, and saying like, where are they at this stage, and what do they do? What's their iconic thing? And you'll notice with Han, like, he shoots the same, right? Like his basic is always like to pull the pistol out and do this shot. Like, so that's very characteristic of Han Solo, but still trying to identify him differently. So Kylo the same way, like, you got this like brooding, physically, leaning over, menacing kind of character, and so translating that, like carrying that over and making sure his attacks are these just like raw, emotion-based, lack of restraint kind of moves. So
her and Kylo started out as attackers, and now they become tanks. Was there a reason behind that, or did it just end up that way?
I think so. With Kylo, it kind of ended up that way because we had a need for that on the First Order team. There wasn't really anybody filling a solid tank role on the First Order team that we felt happy or satisfied by, and so his was born kind of out of necessity of who he is. And also, I think the same thing with Rey. We wanted Rey to be survivable. Like I said in the earlier part of the interview, excuse me. She's easily one of the strongest defensive characters in the game, and we wanted that to kind of manifest itself through her, her tags and that tank class.
Was there a reason for making her a non-taunting tank?
Gosh, yes, but I think it's more of just like how the design evolves. We try to avoid, I don't know, taunt is great, but taunt is a very blunt function, right? Like, it's a direct solution to everybody on your opposing team. And so we do try to get creative with how tanks interact, and we don't want every single tank to have taunt. And I know some people will disagree with that, but at the same time, Rey's kit is unique enough that we could kind of do that without a taunt, and that she would be interesting.
When you're designing these characters for episode 8, I know that you have some talks with Lucasfilm, but the movie is under such tight lock and key. I know you probably can't answer this fully, but how much does the movie itself affect the design, or is it just what you want to add into the game?
We have an incredible relationship with Lucasfilm, and they're very involved in making sure that we get these characters as close as possible to who they are in the film. So that's about the best I can answer that.
Now, every time a new character comes out, I think one of the first things that enters people's minds is gear.
Yeah.
Was there some strategy changed with gear? Is she going to need the same 9 Carbantes that General Kenobi needs? What can you tell us about the gear?
So with gearing is interesting, and I think we always try to be cognizant to the gear need. And I know I'll bite the bullet on this one. I know we haven't been super sensitive about gear in the past, and that's something that I think as we've started to see more player feedback and we see behaviors and patterns, like, I'm a big proponent of trying to make the gear more reasonable as we move forward, and I think we're starting to get to that place, and we still have a lot of ground to cover, but we're working on that. What we try to do, especially with characters like Rey, and look, General Kenobi as well, he was such an important character at the time of his release inside Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes that we wanted the gear to represent his beefiness and his tankiness, and so that gear is really important to him. Same thing in Rey. We always look at the character and we say, okay, what's their role? How do they interact? What do we expect them to do? How much damage or how much punishment do we expect them to take? How much damage? So there's a lot of questions. So we'll design the base kit and we'll say, like, okay, this is X behavior, and we'll test it. And then the deficiencies are kind of made up in gear, right? So we say, like, all right, she doesn't have enough survivability, or she doesn't have enough armor penetration, or she doesn't have enough attack, or whatever it is. We can manipulate all of those final stats through that gear progression, and then also kind of put it in a way where, based on where she is in her life cycle, gear 10, gear 4, whatever it is, that she's dealing the appropriate amount of damage or taking the appropriate amount of damage for that stage.
My favorite part of her kit is the locked healing immunity. Why is that in there?
Because of Zeta Barris and Gen Ken.
I knew it.
Yeah, like let's be real, right? Like,
thank you.
Come on, man. How long can people deal with that?
Thank you. I had a mini party when I saw a counter to Zeta Barris.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, too, is, like, it's important to recognize that we try to always put things in that give kind of a rock, paper, scissors, lizard Spock sort of thing going on, and that there's no one place where people can go, like, I built the ultimate party and nobody can beat me. We always want to try to have counters in there, and I think Zeta Barris has had a wonderful run, and I think it's just time that we need to address healing in the game.
Was this intended to all-out remove Zeta Barris, or just provide everyone with one other tool instead of something like Nihilus?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Provide people with a tool. Like, look, it is my dream that someday people go into Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes and they look at the top meta and they go, man, that's some variety in there. There are a lot of options in there. Look, if I can't chase these characters, I can get these characters. If I can't get these, I can get these. That there's some sort of interplay going on that people need to be engaged with PvP and can't just be like, okay, I put one team in there and then I can just walk away and for the next 5 days I won't slip more than 1 or 2 positions, right? So she's definitely meant to be a tool. She's definitely not meant to eliminate Zeta Barris. We'll see how that goes.
So I think you highlight one of the kind of stalemates that we've reached in the game with the Luke meta in Arena.
Yeah.
It seems difficult to dethrone him without releasing even more OP tunes.
Right.
What's the current approach for tackling that, for introducing some variation back into the arena?
So right now, Night Sisters, I believe, completely obliterate the Commander Luke. And I don't think that they're more powerful than Luke. They're just a different approach to Luke. And they're just a different approach to power. I think Rey will also provide a significant threat to Luke's throne as well. And like I said, the main goal was to try to get to a place where it's not Rey and CLS sitting in the same party, ruling from on high. It always just comes down to mechanics, right? Like, we're always looking at, okay, who has what, who's in the top meta, how can we counter that, or how can we make it a little more difficult to rely on that, or just how can we make it a little more unstable that you're not guaranteed to stay in the top with that character. And I think that's where we came from with Rey.
So the approach is kind of buffing up these entire faction teams, so it's not just a hodgepodge team of the strongest characters in the game.
I mean, and I think, like, here's the thing. There's always going to be a hodgepodge, right? And I think Wampa's a good example of that. You can just kind of toss Wampa in wherever, and that's kind of cool. But it's okay for him to be hodgepodge because he doesn't really have a clan. It's not like I'm going to throw the Wampa tag out and Wampa family comes out next year. Spoiler alert, Wampa family comes out next year. No,
you heard it here first.
No, please no. But the idea is that it would also be an insult to the players if we said, like, cool, no characters really have any synergy with anybody that's like them, and so, what would be the point of the tag system at that point? So we do try to keep things thematically together, Ewoks, droids, Night Sisters, Separatists, etc., but we also try to provide enough that, like, if people want to mix and match, that's one of the fun things about the game. It's like, dude, check it out. I could put CLS with Thrawn and these other characters you would never, ever see in canon. Like, it's a toy set, and that's really what we're trying to achieve there. So it's a balance trying to walk that line.
Okay. I think I have one more question.
Cool.
And it'll probably be your least favorite question.
That's okay.
I think it's the one that's burning through everyone's pockets.
Sure.
So one of the biggest talking points about Rey right now is about her requirements. So I think as a free-to-play player, we're kind of used to having to get a lot of characters the second time around, but we're used to, if you're a long-time player or if you were able to just focus, then you could maybe have a shot at getting this character. But with Rey, with the veterans, it's pretty much impossible for a free-to-play player to get her this time around, and that's kind of frustrating to some people, especially if they've been playing the entire 2 years and they still have no shot. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we are turning on double drops to try to help address that. Look, at the end of the day, I completely understand where people are coming from. What I am tasked with doing is making sure that the content is there. I don't really get to make decisions on the roads that people take to get certain things. I have a voice in it, but ultimately, you know, that lies outside of myself. We are always taking data from, and man, it sounds like a cop-out, and I don't want people to feel like, oh, we always take data and then we look at it, but like we genuinely do. We genuinely try to look at players' behaviors and try to make sure that, you know, there's a balance between, you know, what we're trying to do with the game and what players want from the game. So, you know, if this turns out to be really brutal and it's really impacting players in a negative way, then I promise we're going to look at that and make an adjustment the best that we can. And that's, I know it feels like a cop-out. I apologize, but, you know, it's kind of where we are right now.
Is this kind of like a special one-time thing or that severe of a requirement, or is the game kind of moving in that direction? I
have no idea, to be honest, because it's not like we look at something and go like, yeah, this is how we're going to totally do it. We're going to just totally, you know, make it this way or make it that way. I think there's been enough history now that we've got under our belts over the last few years that, you know, requirements and accessibility of requirements and what we offer and how we offer it has grown and changed and evolved. Some would say better, some would say worse. I think we're on a positive trend. I think we've tried to make sure that people can get everything. So I couldn't answer that because I just don't know how it's going to turn out and what it's going to look like.
Fair enough. All right, let's wrap up on a positive note. What is your ultimate goal for this game?
Ultimately, I'd love it to just continue to be the #1 Star Wars game. At the end of the day, I know people think that, you know, we don't care or whatever, but I legit love Star Wars, and I legit love making games. I've been doing this a long time, and there isn't a single person. I said this somewhere else, and I'll say this again too, but there isn't a single person on this team who doesn't want to make this game. And there isn't a single person on this team who isn't into Star Wars or believes in what we're doing from a gameplay perspective and puts their heart and soul into this. I would love if there was a day where 99% of the people who played this looked at this and legitimately said, you know what, in spite of everything, I think CG has our back. I think the game that they're making at the core is a good game, and that I really love playing it, and I really love Star Wars. That would just be, like, that's what we're striving for, and I sincerely hope that that's what we see.
Is there a specific experience that you're hoping people have in this game?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the toy box experience, right? Like, collecting what they want and feeling like the characters that they chase are valuable and have value. And that just, you know, I don't know if we'll ever get to that because that's how a meta-based, kind of power-based game is. You always have some characters falling out of the power trend, and we're always kind of chasing that, trying to make sure that, you know, everybody gets love and faction passes and you know, Zetas and everything else. But we're not going to stop. We're just going to keep tuning people and adjusting it. And so if people could ever feel like it's a toy box and they could get the things that they wanted and play with them the way they wanted to, that'd be pretty dope.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know the community really appreciates it. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. It's great. I love talking to you guys, and you know, like I said, I hope everybody can come to a place where, like, they feel like it's a game they want to play.
All right. Well, hopefully until next time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.